welcome back to another episode of Let We Hear From Doc. Today, we're taking you way back to NNP's origin, its history, its principles, its philosophy, and its core values that has shaped its leadership style. I am your host, Amanda Chapal George, and with me is Dr. the Right Honourable Keith Claudius Mitchell. So, Dr. Mitchell, take us back to the very beginning of the new National Party, where it started, who were the early visionaries, and what the original mission of the party was.
Well, basically, one should say that the parties was basically formed originally in 1984. That's, if you recall, after the fall of the revolution, when the revolution destroyed itself. And of course, they had a massacre in Fort George and so on. So I was then, at the time, comfortable in the United States as a professor in the field of mathematics and statistics at Howard University. Then, and comfortable, I was doing lots of consultant work and working with various businesses internationally and of course in Washington and throughout the States. So I was very comfortable materially and otherwise. And and of course, given the destruction that occurred after the fall of the revolution and the fact that the country was in chaos, and because people like myself, although being abroad, was very active in taking position against some of the ills of the revolution. We complimented the revolution and the positive aspect, but we were certainly against the arresting and putting in jail people without charge or trial. So I was well known at Howard University and in Washington, being very outspoken against the revolution for that the human rights of people of the country. So when the revolution destroyed itself, the calls were coming from all over. You guys need to come home. Those of you who saw the ills, what was taking place in the country and saw what has happened, and given the state of the country right now, we need the patriots to come home and try to, but almost to the point implying that we have to come and rescue the country. Now, could you imagine you are comfortably placed in Washington, um, doing well in every sense of the word. And of course, I was very much involved in my academic work at the university. And a lot of people depending on me. We had a small firm also doing statistical and consulting work in several areas of the science. And a lot of this because basically I was almost the CEO of the company. So not only was disappointing the university, but disappointing the people that work with me. And therefore it was a tough call when people were calling, and I had some sleepless nights. And of course, no member of my family supported me in making a decision to come home at the time of chaos. Literally, you didn't know what you were coming to. Um, and I remember when I approached the chairman of my department, he said, "Are you sure this is what you're leaving your job to go home? You know the situation in Grenada." While because my professor was a well-known mathematician in the United States, and he was also a passionate. He had passionate political views and what was happening in South Africa with apartheid and so on. So he had an understanding of the political situation that I was facing. But he said, you have to be careful because this is your whole life involved. And he finally, when I finally decided, I could not resist coming. He said, "Look, I will give you. Why don't you take a year sabbatical, no leave, no pay leave?" And of course, I accepted this. And then, of course, I had to talk to my family members, which are vehemently against that move. And of course, I had the guys I was working with, and whose livelihood depended on my presence. It was a hard take, a very difficult decision, and all the other things I was doing. You know, I was at that time also president of the Washington Cricket League, very much involved in sports in Washington, and so on. So I had to, it's almost like a decision. When I look back, I said to myself sometime, you had to be a little bit of a madman to to have made that decision. But the real reason what caused me to finally make that decision, I said to myself, if I did not go and the country deteriorated in every sense, politically, socially, and otherwise, and I would feel a sense of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And that although I would be financially very much as strong as I am today, um, I would not be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if I did go and things did not work out, and the country did find alternative persons who can help to rebuild the country and so on, then I would have done my share.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, since the chairman said that you have a year sabbatical, no pay leave, I said, well, that's a good opportunity. That's how I made the decision to finally come home. And when I got in the country, well, of course, people were in a state of shock with the fall of the revolution and how things went. And it was talking to people. You couldn't go talking to people about politics because everybody was in shock. If in my community, they had a number of people who died on the fort and around the country. So you go to places visiting people, um, and people throwing themselves on your shoulder crying, and you could have seen the pain. So that was a tough time emotionally for someone like myself returning home. But then it came about that we had to look at the future.
Mm-hmm.
You can't remain in shock. The country needs to move on. You had an interim government led by Nicholas Braffett and a team of technical people to bring the country back in that interim period before you go back to our system of government, parliamentary system of government. And therefore, it was almost about a year after 83. That's why I'm talking about 1984. And then you had the old Mr. Herbert Blaze, then, who was the leader of the Grenada National Party before the revolution overthrew Gary. And of course, he was not involved much in the politics. But people looked towards him because as an old man who understood the country and who were there over the years in the political arena and who people trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may not have felt that his politics was progressive enough or that he was aggressive enough politically in making decisions and so on. But people trusted him. And at that point, the issue of trust and confidence was the major factor a politician had to face. And there's no way the people would have gone back and trusted some young blood again, because as you remember, most of the people in the revolution, like Morrison, was in the late 30s, early 40s. And so people are looking towards somebody like Herbert Blaze. And therefore, a number of people came together and decided that they wanted to help bring that team, a team of younger blood, together with Mr. Blaze and more senior members in the country, in the country's politics. And then you had regional leaders, James Mitchell of St. Vincent, John Compton of St. Lucia, Eugenia Charles in Dominica, a number of other regional politicians, Edward Siaga in Jamaica, Barbados, Tom Adams, and so on. Then a number of them who encouraged the whole question of unifying the opposition forces, because Gary was back home, and of course he was seen as since he was the one that was overthrown, and who people felt was unjustly removed from government. You see that, but because of his presence, people felt, look, we didn't want to go back to the period where people there's anger against persons and so on, and the political divide in the country. So it was felt that there should be a unified opposition, and you couldn't stop Gary's party from running in the election. And that's how that whole formation of the NNP came about. As you remember, the NDP in Trinidad was the National Democratic Party, and James Mitchell having a lot of influence with Edward Seaga in Jamaica, Jamaica Labour Party, they all decided that to recommend to us that the new party should be named the NNP. That's how the NNP came about, and we can't deny our past. Some people might look at it negatively, but that was just a history, and we have, when you're dealing with history, you do not want to dilute the facts. You say exactly what it's supposed to be. So that's what really happened, and I think and then it was felt that we wanted to form a unified team. That team was formed. And Mr. Blaze felt that he wanted a young person who, because you had a political leader and a deputy political leader, and he felt that the key position in the party, outside of those key areas, the chairman and the political leader and so on, should be the general secretary. And therefore Mr. Blaze called him and he said that he wanted me to 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 be the general secretary of the party. And I mean, I wonder why me, because I couldn't understand it. He said, show me any person that you feel have better qualified based on your relationship with people, having been a national cricketer, involved in teaching, involved in all sorts of community activities prior to living and going to Washington. He said, no, you are best suited, and your name recognition because of my 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 sporting connection and academic connection. People knew me well over the years because of that the past relationship in those areas. So I then finally accepted, and therefore the party did um, run in the general elections in 1984, and of course we won 14 out of the 15 seats. We lost only St. George, St. Andrews Northeast. Marcel Peters, who was running for under the GLP ticket, he won that seat, and I was elected in Northwestern Georgia. It's the first time with 60% of the vote, and the GLP got 40%, and that was the lowest percentage I've ever got. The lowest after that was in 1990 when the party split up in so many different parts because Mr. Blaze formed this TNP, Brizan left the NNP and formed the NDC, which is the government today, and therefore we are left with the NNP. So the party only won 2 seats in the general election in 1990 when the split occurred. I won my seat, 70% of the votes then. And of course, we won St. Mark's. These are the only 2 seats in the country that the NNP have never lost in any general election since 1984. And I must say that that's why we're always be appreciative of the people in Northwest St. George's. Because despite the fact that the party split up in so many parts, and I only got 60% in 1984. And Mr. Blaze left and he had support. Brizan left and he had some young support. So technically I should have lost in 1990 when we ran, but the people gave me a stronger mandate. A lot of the GLP supporters in 1984 turned and voted for me, with Sir Eric appearing to be declining in his physical health. They all turned to me because my relationship with the GLP supporters historically has always been very good, despite the fact that I was not running on their ticket originally. There was that relationship, and that's how my politics has been consistently. I do not make enemies in politics because people did not support me. I always believe people have that right to support the party of their choice, and I would propose the policy that I support and criticize theirs. But when the people make a decision, we have to learn to work together and to concentrate on building the country, not on building ourselves individually and our political party, but the country as a whole.
Now that has been very interesting.
You may not have been born yet.
You learn a lot from these stories. But what is the core philosophy that has always guided the NMP's approach to leadership and governance?
Well, I think if you look at the party's um, principles when it was formed, it was about uh, freedom, movement of freedom of the people, people's right to be free to speak. That was a fundamental philosophy of the party. People right to have a job, to earn a livelihood. People have a right to live where they wish to live in the society. And the party also had a fundamental belief we have to learn to take policy position that can improve the economic life of the country so that people can be able to earn livelihood as the economy increases going forward. And of course, people have a right to the political party of their choice. That there must be um, an opportunity for people to differ with you with another person on the political front and not necessarily hate each other. These were some of the fundamental principles of the NNP in its original formation. And I think basically, historically, one could look back at the New National Party over the years. And I mean, and I'm proud to say this. While the people might say they 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 had they had maybe feel that they were not treated well during a period of government of the NNP. They can't say the NNP victimized them to the point they didn't have any opportunity to make a livelihood, and that people were able to see that they should not have a livelihood going forward. I never believed in those things. So I think that's the general, I would say, the general philosophy of the NNP. And I believe that that's why I think the party has survived, despite the fact that many political organizations have been formed since 1984 and did not survive. It was based on personalities and it wasn't based on fundamental principles, which the NNP stood for.
We often hear NNP speaking on poor and vulnerable, marginalized. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, no, because my own philosophy as someone who was leader of the NNP since 1984. Well, in fact, since I shouldn't say 1984, I was leader of the NNP in 1987. Yes, 87. But even when Mr. Blaze was leader, the fundamental philosophy of the NNP still stood. I mean, that people, as I said, people have a right, to support the party of their choice, and that the country there must be freedom to speak your views on any matter, freedom of religion, and so on. That the fundamental principles of the party going forward. So I think these were some of the key issues we had to face.
How did NNP consistently manage to deliver during difficult economic periods when other governments struggled?
Yeah, you mentioned this. Didn't I must go back to that point about the poor and vulnerable, because I believe that you in government, you have to initiate policies and programs that make everyone in society feel that they have an opportunity to improve their lot and so on. So that's a general principle. Whether the person is very poor or whether the person is very rich, each person has an interest in their own development and improvement of their lives. And therefore, the government has a right to create policies and programs that give each person an opportunity to improve their lot as they see fit. But fundamentally, any serious government must have a specific focus outside of the general philosophy of everyone having a chance. The group that needs government the most must be the poor and the vulnerable. They are the least able to take initiative to help themselves. So government has to put a special focus. And I felt strongly about this. And one of the reasons I felt so strongly about it, because having grown up in a family where we think we hardly have anything, and therefore we saw poverty at that ground level in the community I live, among the people we live with, and growing up and not being able to have basic things that you wanted and could not have. I always felt a strong empathy for the poor and vulnerable in society. I remember once visiting a community of more middle class persons in the country, and they asked me about road, and I was Minister of Works, and that needed to be done. I told them, no, I will do everything I can, but they have to try and help me because they're limited resources. But I told them I'm going off from here to a village in the country where these people have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel I have a special reason to reach out to them and do what I can. And they weren't in a position like the ones I was talking to help themselves because they had no resources.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to that village, I don't want to call the village name. I remember that I got there about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I saw about 40 young men on the block.
Mm-hmm.
At 1:30 in the afternoon, that means there's no work,
Mm-hmm.
no roads, no water, no electricity, no telephone. I mean, and it touched me and made me realize, you know, while we ourselves might be having the basic amenities in life, there are people all over the country that didn't have any. It was I see it as a sense of hopelessness. Without water, without electricity, without I don't. That's why I don't call the name because I don't think it's fair to do so. But that told me something that we have a responsibility to do what we can, and that we need to put a special focus on those the vulnerable and the poor in the society who need to lift themselves up, to lift up, to be lifted up, to be helped, to be lifted up, and that government has a fundamental responsibility in in ensuring that these people have an opportunity to grow going forward.
Mhm. Now, let's go back to the question before. How did NNP consistently manage to deliver during difficult economic periods when other governments struggled?
Well, I think the philosophy, we felt that we want to unite the country because unless you bring people together, you're going to find it difficulty, especially in a country like it was then, and now at least we're better off. There are little or no resources, as I mentioned before. How do you be able to do things and to improve the lot of the country as a whole? You must use the human resources of the country. So if you create a situation, he didn't vote for me, she didn't vote for me, they must not eat, they must not work, already you're failing. You're going to fail. Well, we fundamentally saw the need first to use the human capacity in the country. And then, of course, you have to have the vision of what are the Grenada's fundamental resources: agriculture, tourism, and of course the human resources of the country, and all the physical capacity that were available at the time. So we have to realize we have to use that to take initiative that can in fact extract the maximum potential of those various areas of economic potential, and that's why we focused on that. And of course, the good thing was going for the NNP at the time when it was formed. We had a regional relationship to call the Caribbean Democratic Union. So most of these governments were in, most of these parties that were part of the CDU were also in government, right? So when we got into government, we had prime ministers right through the region that we could have touched base with and use as sounding board and on various because they had much more experience than I did, and so on. Similarly, the CDU had a relationship with the IDU, International Democrat Union, of which the Republican Party in the United States and the Conservative Party, Republican Party in the United States, which was headed by Ronald Reagan at the time, and then George Bush came in afterwards, and then you had the Conservative Party headed by Margaret Thatcher, and afterwards you had other leaders with a similar outlook, philosophical outlook, and many other countries around the world. So we had an opportunity now, being in government, to meet with and sit with these leaders and seek their advice and support. So we got a lot of international support, um, um, not just politically, but also in terms of material support to build the economy of the country. So that connection regionally and internationally was extremely useful in helping us to take some bold initiative to improve the economy of the country. Because when you look, Amanda, at the time we came in, basically we didn't have no, only 45% of the country had electricity, right? And water, even in my own village, we didn't have. Water, if you get water 3 months a year, you're lucky.
Wow.
Right? We had no. I mean, I grew up in Happy Hill, where we had to go to the river to collect water to drink. And you know what? Drinking water from the
Wow.
river, what is
People
like the
being in
kind
the
of
river.
bait alone you're talking bait. I won't go and say what else they were doing. But you had to, yeah, that's how maybe that's why I'm strong. That's why I live, that's why some of us live long, because we had to go through all sorts of processes to get basic services. So we had that problem right through the community of a lack of services, and so you really realize you had to go do as much you can to be able to get fundamental resources to be able to improve the country as a whole, and that's one of the reasons I believe that the NNP was successful. We had to use our connection, but we also had to be very innovative and a visionary in terms of the decision-making process of government. So I think we can safely say that it had a lot to do with the successes that we had, and our ability to use the regional international connection, our ability to also have that vision to understand how you build an economy using the basic resources of the country. Also, what sort of other initiative that you can take to help to propel economic activity in the country. All that were very useful in going forward. And I think we had a combination of young persons in the party and people with experience. And that's one problem I always think we want us to be careful. Sometimes we say we need some more young persons, or we need some more experience. You need both.
You need a balance.
You need both, because the young people with the energy and aggressiveness, they're vast, they're extremely important. But you also need the people who have passed through over the years, who have seen the mistakes made, and who could help maneuver the, themselves in that atmosphere, or where if you take the wrong decision, you could have a catastrophe. If you take the right decision, you could have a booming economic activity in the country. So all these things are so important, and I think we were fortunate that we had that balance, which helped us in moving the country forward. But within 5 years, I would say 5 years, the first 5 years, we were able to bring water to many villages in the country, bring electricity. With the new telephone system, we are the first country in the region in 1995, 96 that had digital telephone system. And I was a minister of telecommunication prior to that. And of course, I used that my own experience abroad in Washington and so on, and the connection I had. I traveled to many countries and seek out advice in the United States and in Canada. And when we got in Canada, the government of the day then asked us to touch base with Northern Telecom, which was one of the top telecom company. And that's how we got a new telephone system. Northern Telecom from Canada was the original persons that helped us in setting up the new telephone system. So that's what I'm saying. So all area, and of course roads. I mean, when I came, there was a time we used to say there were road in the hole. But now I think in some cases, I think we almost getting back to this. In this time, you see more road in the hole than some holes in the road, so to speak. So I think one could safely say that um, when you look back at how far we've come, and a lot of people don't know this, or don't understand, or forget the sacrifice were made by the founding fathers of the party and government at the time, and the sacrifices they made, because the privilege was not there, and there were no resources. We had to be going begging the banks to lend us resources, even to pay salaries. That's how bad things were, because we just didn't have the resources. And today, when you compare that, we left this government with over $500 million in in cash, and in addition to the areas of services that will bring in sufficient revenue, like customs, inland revenue, to run the country on a consistent basis. And of course, having the regional international connection to help us to got soft loans through the international organizations and of course friendly governments. We got be able to get grants from the European Union and from friendly countries and so on, and organizations who are very happy with the decision process that we are involved in. And therefore all these things help us in improving the lives of the people of the country during that particular period.
Doc, we're about to wrap up, but you have won 15 seats multiple times, a historic achievement. How did you manage to govern the country effectively without an official opposition?
Well, um, winning the 15 seats, one has to ask, um, how did that happen?
Mhm.
I think fundamentally, in 1995, when we came to government the first time, we only won 8 seats, and 7 was won by opposition forces. And in the history of the country over the years, prior to our being in government, when a party loses a seat badly, it literally ignores that area. um, I wouldn't go into specific details, but that was the history of the country throughout adult suffrage before the NNP came into government. So, so it means that we technically should have only been looking at the areas we marginally lost and the ones that we won, and forget the areas that we were beaten badly, and there were a few of those. But that was not my fundamental philosophy. Take a constituency of Carriacou and Peter Martinic. In 1995, we got 160 something votes. If I'm pretty sure I'm close to the right number. In other words,
Wow. We were beaten.
we I'm not sure if we lost the deposit because I think you have to get a limited percentage to to deposit you put down to run. If you get that percent threshold, you get back the resources after the election. I don't know. I can't remember whether we did get that threshold, but we were beaten badly in Carriacou and a few other areas. But I use Carriacou as an example. And take for example during the period of ULP. ULP never used to win Carriacou, and they just ignore Carriacou. Period. But I said to myself in discussing with our own team and other persons involved in the developmental thrust where we are heading in the country, I said, listen, if you ignore one part of the country,
Mhm.
you are in fact ignoring the potential development thrust of your entire government and the country as a whole.
Mhm.
And by removing any citizen's right to succeed and have opportunities at any given time can necessarily backfire against the government, the governing authority in the country. So that was a fundamental philosophy. And therefore, what we did was we had meetings in Carriacou and telling people, while we did not win, we want to, whatever we can do
Mhm.
to work with you and using government resources, the limited amount that we had, we felt that they had a right to those services and to investment opportunities from government. And therefore that we decided that that's what we had to do going forward. And I remember Elvin Nimrod, who ran as an opposition member, as an independent member in that election. He lost by 20 something votes. Um, we called him and he said, look, NMP did not make any progress in elections in Carriacou and Peter Martinic. And we needed leadership in Carriacou to work with.
Mhm.
And since you did not win, but you came close and you had the literal support of a lot of people in Carriacou,
Mhm.
let's work together. And he said, give him some time and he will think about it. And over a period of time, after a year, Nimrod decided to come and work with us to build Carriacou. It was not working with us to build NNP. because as we said, we could have ignored Carriacou and concentrated in the other 14 constituency or 12 or 10 in Grenada and most likely form government as we did with original 1999. And he came on and we worked. And there were, I mean, the amount of roads that we built in Carriacou, the electricity was brought to several parts of Carriacou that we didn't have. We brought desalination plant to provide water services to the country. The new telephone system. The first part of the country that had a digital telephone system was Carriacou, because you had to install the system in different sections of the country. And therefore, Nimrod worked with us. And what happened? The next election in 99, we won Carriacou with him. We won, in fact, we won all the seats in 1999 because of what happened in 99 when one of the members resigned and the people felt it was unfair. So we had mass support. As the first 15 seats that we won in elections. So that tells you something. And that underscores the point I was making. You don't just think of development of an area just because the people voted for you or they did not vote for you. You don't. The policies should not be based on this. Every citizen, every area of the country has a fundamental right to be able to receive the government services, and of course, to use their share of the resources of the country. And that's my philosophy, and that's, I believe, no one can say that we victimize an entire area. In fact, people in my own constituency used to be saying, well, they go to Carriacou and they see all in roads and we still have all the roads. They expect me to build. But you see, Northwesters, as you know, we had one major road in Northwest, that's the main road. And then you had Morris and the Grenville Road going to New Hampshire, and a few other minor roads inside, but never a massive roads. So we did work there, but we couldn't do all the areas in Northwest, knowing that we didn't have the extent of road network as many parts of the country. So the amount of investment in terms of dollars spent on Northwest St. George's was minuscule compared to what we spent in Carriacou and a lot of constituency around the country. With St. David's, for example, which would have every in the massive area St. David's was, and the amount of the road network and that was extremely large. So we would have spent about 20 times the resources in St. David's as we spent in Northwest St. George's. But I was satisfied that that was the right decision. And the people gave us all the seats, and that was the first time I won over 91% of the votes in my constituency. I don't think anybody else, the history, when you look at the history of the Grenada, I don't think you'd ever have seen any other time where a politician won over 91% of the votes in his constituency. I got 87 afterwards, 88, 85, and the last election, 80%. So I feel privileged, and that's why I think had we not treated the people of Northwest as they should, the vote I got in 1984, 60%, I would not have been able to grow that vote to the point of getting over 91% and getting 80s and the large high 80s consistently during that time. So, in other words, it's not just a philosophy being spoken about, but it's actual putting into practice. Because a lot of times, there are a lot of politicians, they stand and they come with a glib talk and they dress nice and they're pretty and so on and make promises. And I would we give you all contract work. All contract work is illegal and everybody going to have a job and everything. And then when the time comes, watch them practicing, you see that most of the time they're out of the country. They don't have time to visit people. Well, that's we see politics differently. It's about service, not the words are important, but if the words without the practical application, makes no sense.
So guys, remember, like, share, and subscribe to our channel.